When Carmilla gave me the present of a hearing trumpet, she may have foreseen some of the consequences. Carmilla is not what I would call malicious. She just happens to have a curious sense of humor. The trumpet was certainly a fine specimen of its kind without being really modern. It was, however, exceptionally pretty, being encrusted with silver and mother-of-pearl motifs and grandly curved like a buffalo's horn. The aesthetic presence of this object was not its only quality. The hearing trumpet magnified sound to such a degree that ordinary conversation became quite audible, even to my ears. Here I must say that all my senses are by no means impaired by age. My sight is still excellent, although I use spectacles for reading when I read, which I practically never do. True, rheumatics have bent my skeletons somewhat. This does not prevent me taking a walk in clement weather and sweeping my room once a week on Thursday, a form of exercise which is both useful and edifying. Here I may add that I consider that I am still a useful member of society and believe still capable of being pleasant and amusing when the occasion seems fit. The fact that I have no teeth and never could wear dentures does not in any way discomfort me. I don't have to bite anybody, and there are all sorts of soft edible foods easy to procure and digestible to the stomach. Mashed vegetables, chocolate, and bread dipped in warm water make the base of my simple diet. I never eat meat, as I think it's wrong to deprive animals of their life when they are so difficult to chew anyway. I am now 92, and for some 15 years I have lived with my son and his family. Our house is situated in a residential district and would be described in England as a semi-detached villa with a small garden. I don't know what they call it here, but probably some Spanish equivalent of spacious residence with park. This is untrue. The house is not spacious. It is cramped. There's nothing resembling even faintly a park. There is, however, a fine backyard, which I share with my 2 cats, a hen, the maid, and her 2 children, some flies, and a cactus plant called maguey. My room looks onto this nice backyard, which is very convenient as there are no stairs to negotiate. I merely have to open the door in order to enjoy the stars at night, or the early morning sun, the only manifestation of sunlight which I can abide. The maid, Rosina, is an Indian woman with a morose character and seems generally opposed to the rest of humanity. I do not believe that she puts me in a human category, so our relationship is not disagreeable. The maguey plant, the flies, and myself are things which occupy the backyard. We are elements of the landscape and are accepted as such. The cats are another matter. Their individuality puts Rosina into fits of delight or fury, according to her temper. She talks to the cats. She never talks to her children at all, although I think she likes them in her own way. I never could understand this country, and now I am beginning to be afraid that I never will get back to the north, never get away from here. I must not give up hope. Miracles can happen, and very often do happen. People think 50 years is a long time to visit any country because it is more than half a lifetime. To me, 50 years is no more than a space of time stuck somewhere I don't really want to be at all. For the last 45 years, I have been trying to get away. Somehow, I never could. There must be a binding spell which keeps me in this country. Sometime I shall find out why I stayed so long here, while I am happily contemplating reindeer and snow, cherry trees, meadows, the song of the thrush. England is not always the focus of these dreams. I do not, in fact, particularly want to install myself in England, although I will have to visit my mother in London. She is getting old now. although enjoying excellent health. 110 is not such a great age, from a biblical point of view at least. Margrave, my mother's valet, who sends me postcards of Buckingham Palace, tells me she is still very spry in her wheelchair, although how anyone can be spry in a wheelchair, I really don't know. He says she's quite blind, but has no beard, which must be a reference to a photograph of myself, which I sent as a Christmas gift last year. Indeed, I do have a short gray beard, which conventional people would find repulsive. Personally, I find it rather gallant. England would be a matter of a few weeks. Then I would join my lifelong dream of going to Lapland, to be drawn in a vehicle by dogs, woolly dogs. All this is a digression, and I do not wish anyone to think my mind wanders far. It wanders, but never further than I want. So, I live with my Galahad, mostly in the backyard. Now, Galahad has a rather large family, and he is by no means rich. He lives on a small wage paid to consular employees, those who are not actually ambassadors. These, I am told, get a more ample salary from the government. Galahad is married to the daughter of the manager of a cement factory. Her name is Muriel, and both her parents are English. Muriel has 5 children, one of which, the youngest, still lives with us here. This boy, Robert, is 25 and has not married yet. Robert is not a pleasant character, and even as a child, he was unkind to cats. He also circulates on a motorcycle and introduced a television set into the house. From that time on, my visits to front regions of our residence became increasingly rare. If I ever appear there now, it is always rather in the nature of a specter, if I may say so. This seems to give a certain relief to the rest of the family, as my table manners were becoming unconventional. With age, one becomes rather less sensitive to the idiosyncrasies of others. For instance, at the age of 40, I would have hesitated to eat oranges in a crowded tram or bus. Today, I would not only eat oranges with impunity, but I would take an entire meal unblushingly in any public vehicle, and wash it down with a glass of port, which I take now and again, as a special treat. Nevertheless, I make myself useful and help in the kitchen, which is next door to my room. I peel vegetables, feed the hen, and as I mentioned before, carry out other violent activities like sweeping out my room on Thursdays. I give no trouble at all, and keep myself clean with no assistance from anybody. Every week brings a certain amount of mild enjoyment. Every night, in fine weather, the sky, the stars, and of course the moon in her season. On Mondays in clement weather, I walk 2 blocks down the road and visit my friend Carmela. She lives in a very small house with her niece, who bakes cakes for a Swedish tea shop, although she is Spanish. Camilla has a very pleasant life and is really very intellectual. She reads books through an elegant lorgnette and hardly ever mumbles to herself as I do. She also knits very clever jumpers, but her real pleasure in life is writing letters. Carmela writes letters all over the world to people she has never met and signs them with all sorts of romantic names, never her own. Carmela despises anonymous letters, and of course they would be impractical, as who could answer a letter with no name at all, signed at the end? These wonderful letters fly off in a celestial way, by airmail, in Carmela's delicate handwriting. No one ever replies. This is the really incomprehensible side of humanity. People never have time for anything. Well, one fine Monday morning, I went on my usual visit to Carmela, who was actually waiting for me on the doorstep. I could see at once that she was in a state of high excitement, as she had forgotten to put on her wig. Carmela is bald. She would never go out onto the street without her wig on ordinary occasions, as she is rather vain. Her red wig is a kind of queenly gesture to her long-lost hair, which was almost as red as her wig, if my memory is correct. This morning, Carmela was uncrowned with her usual glory, but very excited, and mumbling to herself, which is not her ordinary habit. I had brought her an egg which the hen had laid the same morning. I dropped it as she clutched my arm. This was a great pity, as the egg was now beyond repair. "I was waiting for you, Marian. You're 20 minutes late," she said, taking no notice of the broken egg. "Some day you will forget to come at all." Her voice was a thin shriek, and this was more or less what she said, because of course I did not hear it all. She pulled me inside the house, and after several attempts gave me to understand that she had a present for me. A present, a present, a present! Now, Carmela has given me presents several times, and they are sometimes knitted and somewhat comestible, but I never saw her so excited. When she unwrapped the hearing trumpet, I was at a loss to know whether it could be used for eating or drinking or merely for ornament. And after many complicated gestures, she finally put it to my ear. And what I had always heard as a thin shriek went through my head like the bellow of an angry bull. "Can you hear me, Marian?" Indeed, I could. It was terrifying. "Can you hear me, Marian?" I nodded speechlessly. This frightful noise was worse than Robert's motorcycle. "This magnificent trumpet is going to change your life." Finally, I said, "For goodness sakes, don't shout. You make me nervous." "A miracle," said Carmela, still excited, then using a quieter voice. "Your life will be changed." We both sat down and sucked a violet-scented lozenge, which Carmela likes because it scents the breath. I am now getting used to the rather nasty taste and beginning to like them through my fondness for Carmela. We thought about all the revolutionary possibilities of the trumpet. Not only will you be able to sit and listen to beautiful music and intelligent conversation, but you will also have the privilege of being able to spy on what your whole family are saying about you, and that ought to be very amusing. Carmela had finished her lozenge and had lit a small black cigar, which she reserves for special occasions. "You must, of course, be very secretive about the trumpet, because they might take it away from you if they don't want you to hear what they're saying." "Why should they want to hide anything from me?" I asked, thinking about Carmela's incurable passion for drama. "I don't give them any trouble, and they almost never see me." "You never know," said Carmela. "People under 70 and over 7 are very unreliable if they are not cats. You can't be too careful. Besides, think of the exhilarating power of listening to others talk when they think you cannot hear." "They can hardly avoid seeing the trumpet," I said doubtfully. "It must be a buffalo's horn. Buffaloes are very large animals." "Of course you must not let them see you using it. You have to hide somewhere and listen." I hadn't thought of that. It certainly promised infinite possibilities. "Well, Carmela, I think it is very kind of you, and this mother-of-pearl floral design is very pretty indeed. It looks Jacobean. You will also be able to listen to my last letter, which I haven't sent yet, as I was waiting to read it to you. Ever since I stole the Paris telephone directory from the consulate, I have increased my output. You have no ideas of the beautiful names in Paris. This letter is addressed to Monsieur Belvedere, 8 Noisy, Rue de la Roche-Potin, Paris, Ile. You could hardly invent anything more sonorous, even if you tried. I see him as a rather frail old gentleman, still elegant, with a passion for tropical mushrooms, which he grows in an empire wardrobe. He wears embroidered waistcoats and travels with purple luggage. You know, Carmela, I sometimes think that you might get a reply if you didn't impose your imagination on people you have never seen. Monsieur Belvedere Noisy is undoubtedly a very nice name. But suppose he is fat and collects wicker baskets. Suppose he never travels and he has no luggage. Suppose he is a young man with a nautical yearning. You must be more realistic, I think. You are sometimes very negative-minded, Marian. Although I know you have a kind heart, that is no reason that poor Monsieur Belvedere Noisy should do anything so trivial as collecting wicker baskets. He is fragile, but intrepid. I intend to send him some mushroom spore to enrich the species which he had sent from the Himalayas. There was no more to be said, so Carmela read the letter. She was pretending to be a famous Peruvian alpinist who had lost an arm trying to save the life of a grizzly bear cub trapped on the edge of a precipice. The mother bear had unkindly bitten off her arm. She went on to give all sorts of information about high-altitude fungus and offered to send samples. It seemed to me that she took too much for granted. When I left Carmela's house, it was almost lunchtime. I carried my mysterious parcel under my shawl, walking very slowly in order to reserve energy. I was feeling quite excited by this time, and had almost forgotten that there was to be tomato soup for lunch. I've always been very fond of tinned tomato soup. We do not have it very often. My state of slight exhilaration gave me the idea of walking through the front door, instead of going around the back way, which is my usual procedure. I had a faint idea of stealing 1 or 2 chocolates from Muriel, which she hides behind the bookcase. Muriel is very mean about sweets, and she wouldn't be so fat if she were more generous. I knew she had gone downtown to buy antimacassars to hide grease spots on the chairs. I dislike antimacassars myself, and prefer washable wicker chairs which are not so depressing as cloth when dirty. Unfortunately, Robert was in the lounge entertaining 2 of his friends to cocktails. They all stared at me and looked away quickly when I began explaining that I had been for my usual Monday walk. My diction is not quite as good as it used to be because of having no teeth. My monologue had not gone on for long when Robert took me roughly by the arm and ejected me into the passage leading to the kitchen. It was obvious that he was angry. As Carmela says, one can never trust people under 70 and over 7. As usual, I ate lunch in the kitchen and went to my room to comb Marmine and Cha-Cha, the cats. I comb the cats every day in order to keep their long fur smart and glossy, and to reserve the hair I get off the combs for Carmela, who has promised to knit it into a jumper when there is enough. I have now filled 2 small jam jars with nice soft hair. It seems a pleasant and economical way of having warm clothing for the winter. Carmela thinks that a sleeveless cardigan is a practical garment for cold weather. I have been 4 years now filling the 2 jars, so it may take some time to get enough wool to make a complete garment. It might be possible to weave a little llama wool with it, although Carmela says that would be cheating. Rosina's cousin once brought me the present of a simple Indian spinning wheel. I've been trying it out on cotton waste and spinning nice, useful ropes. By the time I have enough cat's wool to spin, I shall have learned enough to spin fine yarn. This is an enterprising occupation, and I must say, I would be fairly happy if I did not feel so much nostalgia for the North. They say you can see the pole star from here, and that it never moves. I've never been able to find it. Carmela has a planisphere, but we cannot discover how to use it, and there are so few people one can consult on such matters. When I had hidden the hearing trumpet carefully, I set about my afternoon's work. The red hen looked as if she was laying another egg on my bed, and Marmine was objecting to having his tail combed out. All as usual. The sudden apparition of Galahad in the room almost knocked me off my chair. The last time my son visited me was when the tank burst and he came in with the plumber. He stood mouthing in the door. I suppose he was saying something. Then he put a bottle of port wine on my chest of drawers, mouthed some more, and left. This astonishing behavior from Galahad left me pensive till evening. There was no reason I could think of to explain his visit. It was not my birthday, and he never gave me a birthday present. Judging from the weather, it was not Christmas. Why should he make such extravagant changes in his habits? At that time, I do not think I attributed any ominous interpretation to the event. I was merely curious and surprised. Of course, if I had Carmela's gift of perceptive psychology, I might, even then, have been a little preoccupied. In any case, even if I had foreseen the events that followed, there was nothing I could have done except wait. A great deal of my life has been spent in waiting, most of it quite fruitless. Recently, I do not go in for much coherent thought. However, on that occasion, I actually made a plan of action. I wanted to find out the motives for Galahad's unwonted kindness. Not that he lacks ordinary human sentiment, simply that he considers kindness to inanimate creatures a waste of time. He may be right, but on the other hand, the maguey cactus seems alive to me, so I feel I can also make claims on existence. When the evening drew on and dinner time was past, I waited for Rosina to retire, and then, unwrapping my hearing trumpet carefully, I left my room and went and hid in the dark passage between the lounge and the kitchen. The door here was always open, so I had no trouble taking in a nice picture of family life. Galahad was sitting opposite Muriel, near the fireplace, which had an electric log. This was out, as the weather was not too chilly. Robert was sitting on the narrow sofa, tearing the morning paper into strips. The new antimacassars were hanging dutifully on the chairs and sofa. They were dark beige with fringes, practical, I suppose, and easy to wash. The 3 members of my family were engaged in some sort of discussion. "Even if it never happens again, the result is intolerable," said Robert so loudly my trumpet vibrated. "I shall never dare invite any of my friends here again." "I thought everything was already decided," said Galahad. "You don't have to go on being excited when we have all agreed that she would be much better off in a home." "You always decide everything 20 years too late," said Muriel. "Your mother has been a constant anxiety to us for the past 20 years, and you've been stubborn and inert enough to keep her here on our hands just to satisfy your own sentimentality." "Muriel, you're being unfair," said Galahad weakly. "You know we never had the means of keeping her in an institution before Charles died." "The government provides institutions for the aged and infirm," snapped Muriel. "She ought to have been put away long ago." "We are not in England," said Galahad. "Institutions here are not fit for human beings." "Grandmother," said Robert, "can hardly be classified as a human being. She's a drooling sack of decomposing flesh." "Robert," said Galahad without conviction. "Really, Robert." "Well, I've had enough," said Robert, "inviting people here for a normal chat and a drink, and in walks the monster of Glamis, gibbering at us in broad daylight until I have to throw her out. Gently, of course." "Remember, Galahad," added Muriel, "these old people do not have feelings like you or I. She would be much happier in an institution where there's proper help to take care of her. They are very well organized today. This place I told you about in Santa Brigida is run by the Well of Light Brotherhood, and they are financed by a prominent American cereal company, Bouncing Breakfast Cereals Corporated. It is all very efficiently organized and reasonably inexpensive." Yes, you told me, said Galahad, who seemed bored by the discussion. I agree, it seems the sort of place to send her. She will be quite well cared for there, I expect. So, when do we pack her off? Said Robert. I could turn that room into a workshop for the motorbike. There's no desperate hurry, said Galahad. She will have to be told. Told? Said Muriel in surprise. She doesn't have any idea where she is. I don't think she will even notice the change. She might, said Galahad. You never can tell how much she understands about anything. Your mother, replied Muriel, is senile. The sooner you accept that, the better. For a moment I took the trumpet away from my ear, partially because my arm ached. Senile? Yes, I dare say they were right, but what does senile mean? I applied the trumpet again to the other ear. She ought to be dead, Robert said. At that age, people are better off dead. Back in bed, wearing my woolen nightshirt, I found myself trembling with an ague that seemed to belong to someone else. The dreadful recurrent thought was first. The cats. What will become of the cats? Then Carmela. What about Carmela on a Monday morning? And the red hen? And why do they suppose they know that one is better off dead? How can they possibly know that? And oh, dear Venus. I always pray to Venus. She is such a brilliant, unrecognizable star. What is the well of light brotherhood? That sounds more terrifying than death itself. A brotherhood with the grim knowledge of what is better for other people, and the iron determination to better them whether they like it or not. Oh, Venus, what have I done to deserve that? And what about the cats? What will become of Marmeen and Cha-Cha? I shall never spin their wool into a cardigan to warm my bones. I will never wear cat's wool. I shall probably have to wear a uniform. No red hen to lay a daily egg on my bed. Tormented by all these horrible visions and thoughts, I dropped into something nearer to catalepsy than sleep. Naturally, I visited Carmela the next day to tell her the dreadful news. I took my hearing trumpet as I hoped for some advice. There are times, said Carmela, when I am clairvoyant. When I saw that trumpet in the flea market, I said to myself, that is just the right thing for Marian. I had to buy it at once. I had a premonition. This is terrible news. I must try and think of some plan. What do you feel about the well of light brotherhood? I asked. It frightens me. The well of light brotherhood, said Carmela, is obviously something extremely sinister. Not, I suppose, a company for grinding old ladies into breakfast cereal, but something morally sinister. It all sounds terrible. I must think of something to save you from the jaws of the well of light. This seemed to amuse her for no reason at all, and she chuckled, although I could see she was quite upset. They will not allow me to take the cats, you think? No cats, said Carmela. Institutions, in fact, are not allowed to like anything. They don't have time. What shall I do? I said. It seems a pity to commit suicide when I've lived for 92 years and really haven't understood anything. You might escape to Lapland, said Carmela. We could knit a tent here, so you wouldn't have to buy one when you arrived. I have no money. I could never get to Lapland without money. Money is a great nuisance, said Carmela. If I had any, I would give you some, and we would take a holiday on the Riviera on the way to Lapland. We could even gamble a little. Even Carmela had no practical advice. Houses are really bodies. We connect ourselves with walls, roofs, and objects, just as we hang on to our livers, skeletons, flesh, and bloodstream. I am no beauty. No mirror is necessary to assure me of this absolute fact. Nevertheless, I have a death grip on this haggard frame as if it were the limpid body of Venus herself. This is true of the backyard and the small room I occupied at that time. My body, the cats, the red hen, all my body, all part of my own sluggish bloodstream. A separation from these well-known and loved, yes, loved, Things were death and death indeed, according to the old rhyme of the man of double deed. There was no remedy for the needle in my heart with its long thread of old blood. Then what about Lapland and the furry dog team? That would also be a fine violation of those cherished habits, yes indeed, but how different from an institution for decrepit old women. In case they lock you up in a 10-story room, said Carmilla, lighting a cigar, you could take a lot of those ropes you weave and escape. I could be waiting down below with a machine gun and an automobile, a hired automobile, you know. I don't suppose it would be too expensive for an hour or two. Where would you get the machine gun? I asked, intrigued at the idea of Carmilla armed with such a deadly artifact. And how do they work? We never succeeded in operating that planisphere. I suppose that a machine gun would be more complicated. Machine guns, said Carmilla, are simplicity itself. You load them with a lot of bullets and press a trigger. There is no intellectual manipulation necessary, and you don't have to actually hit anything. The noise impresses people. They think you are dangerous if you have a machine gun. You might well be dangerous, I replied, alarmed. Supposing you hit me by mistake. I would only press the trigger in case of absolute necessity. They might turn a pack of police dogs on us, in which case I should be obliged to shoot. A whole pack of dogs is quite a large target. 40 dogs at a distance of 3 yards would not be difficult to hit. I could always tell you apart from an angry police hound. I could not feel quite happy about Carmilla's argument. Supposing there was only one police dog chasing me around and round in circles, you might easily hit me instead of the hound. You, said Carmilla, stabbing the air with her cigar, would be swarming down 10 stories on your rope. The hounds would be attacking me, not you. Well, I said, still not quite convinced. After we had the exercise yard, it would be an exercise yard, I suppose, surrounded by high walls, littered with dead police dogs, what would we do then? And where would we go? We would join the gang at an expensive seaside resort and go on tapping telephone wires for horse race winners before the bookies pay out. Carmilla was off on a tangent. I made an attempt to bring her back to the point of our discussion. I thought you said animals were not allowed in institutions. 40 police dogs are surely animals. Police dogs are not properly speaking animals. Police dogs are perverted animals with no animal mentality. Policemen are not human beings, so how can police dogs be animals? This was impossible to answer. Carmilla ought to have been a lawyer. She was so good at complicated debate. You might just as well say that collie dogs are perverted sheep, I said eventually. If they keep so many dogs in an institution, I don't see what difference a cat or two would make. Think of the cats living in constant anguish amongst 40 ferocious police hounds. Carmilla stared in front of her with an agonized expression. Their nervous systems would not survive a situation like that. She was right, of course, as usual. Still feeling crushed with despair, I hobbled back home. How I would miss Carmilla and her stimulating advice, the black cigars, the violet lozenges. They would probably make me suck vitamins in an institution. Vitamins and police hounds, grey walls, machine guns. I could not think coherently. The horror of the situation floated in tangled masses in my head, making it ache as if it was stuffed with thorny seaweed. Force of habit, rather than my own capacity, carried me home and sat me down in the backyard. Strangely enough, I was in England, and it was Sunday afternoon. I was sitting with a book on a stone seat under a lilac bush. Close by, a clump of rosemary saturated the air with perfume. They were playing tennis nearby. The clump of the rackets and balls was quite audible. This was the sunken Dutch garden. Why Dutch, I wonder? The roses? The geometrical flower beds? Or perhaps because it is sunken? The church bells ringing. That is the Protestant church. Have we had tea yet? Cucumber sandwiches, seed cake, and rock buns. Yes, tea must be over. My long dark hair is soft like cat's fur. I am beautiful. This is quite a shock because I have just realized that I am beautiful. And there is something I must do about it, but what? Beauty is a responsibility like anything else. Beautiful women have special lives like prime ministers, but that is not what I really want. There must be something else. The book. Now I can see it. The Tales of Hans Christian Andersen. The Snow Queen. The Snow Queen, Lapland, little Kay doing multiplication problems in the icy castle. Now I see that I also was given a mathematical problem which I cannot solve, although I seem to have been trying for many, many years. I am not really here in England in this scented garden, although it does not disappear as it nearly always does. I am inventing all this, and it is about to disappear. But it does not.